everybody, this is Tracy here to do the recap of episode 3 of Queen Sugar, which airs on the OWN network on Wednesday nights. This episode is entitled Thy Will Be Done, and the show opens with the reading of the will for Ernest Bordelon, and we learn that Violet, his sister, inherits his boat, and for his 3 children, Charlie, Nova, and Ralph Angel, he leaves his 800 acres of land where he used to farm sugar cane, as well as any other real property that he owns, which would include his house and whatever possessions came in the house. And as the lawyer is reading after she reads the will, she reads a letter from him, and he's basically saying how important it is to keep the land in the family and to keep the legacy of the Bordelon family going by them farming the land and producing the sugar cane going forward. And so Nova and Charlie, they're in shock because they want to sell the land, they want money, I guess, and just be done with everything. So Nova asked the lawyer, she was like, well, when was that letter written? And the lawyer says that it was written in October of 1989. And so Nova surmises that their father was just very prideful at that time and was happy to finally have a son, because that was right after Ralph Angel was born that the letter was written. And so she assumes that he was just feeling that way at the time and meant to change the will but never got around to it. And the 3 of them get into a debate, and Nova and Charlie want to sell the land and Ralph Angel wants to keep it. And he argues that it was still his father's will that they farm the land and keep the land, and that he had mentioned about it as early as the week before he passed away. Charlie lets them know that Sam Landry had came by the property and offered to buy the land, and Nova and Ralph Angel, they are surprised and wondering why she didn't tell them the day that it happened, but she was saying how she didn't think it was that big of a deal. And then Violet jumps in and she's telling each one of them, stop arguing. There's no shame in feeling however it is that they feel about the land, but they need to come together and be unified in whatever decision they decide to make about the land. Ralph Angel gets upset and he storms out, and Violet jumps up and she's running behind him, and she really spoils him because she's going, baby, 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 as she's running behind him. And I'm thinking, okay, this is a grown man, and it's time that, you guys start treating him like a grown man. But she catches up with him outside in the parking lot, and he questions why she didn't take his side. And she tries to explain that she's trying to be impartial and hear everybody out. And then Nova and Charlie join them out in the parking lot, and when they come through the door, Charlie's on the phone and she's calling Sam Landry to see about setting up a meeting to see how much he wants to give them for the land. And the 3 of them, they get into a little spat, and Ralph Angel feels like nobody's listening to him and nobody cares what he's feeling and what he wants to do. They're just thinking about their own selfish needs. And so we see the 3 of them go off in their separate directions to their separate vehicles. And I thought that was interesting how Ava set that up, because it was almost like a triangle where Ralph Angel was parked here, Nova was parked here, and then Charlie was the furthest away from them all at, closer to the building they had just came out of. So it kind of showed like that divide between the family members. Later in the episode, the 3 arrive at Landry's sprawling mansion. He owns, I think he said, over 3,000 acres of land. And you have what look like Mexican workers, and they're out on the landscape, and they're putting in new plants. And on the porch, you see a woman, and she's dressed in a maid uniform, and she's sweeping off the porch. And Charlie asks Nova, has she ever been to the property before? And Nova refers to the property as, the museum of their ancestors, and no, she wasn't interested in going there. And so Landry comes out of the house, and he tells them that his wife has set up a lunch or something in the backyard. And I thought that was interesting because he didn't even let them come up on the stairs and up the steps and ring the doorbell, and he immediately took them around back, which is sort of kind of reminiscent to the days of segregation where black people weren't allowed, to come through the front door. So I thought that was interesting. So he offers them $850 per acre, but Charlie lets him know that she's done her research and that the land is worth double that. But Landry doesn't seem to care, and him and Charlie go back and forth, and he basically tells them that they are too late to even plant the sugar cane, and he's the only one, I guess, that has the expertise to plant this late in the season and bring in a crop. And so Charlie tells him, well, give us a few weeks to think it over. And he tells him, you don't have a few weeks, I'll give you 2 days. And he pretty much cuts the conversation off. There's no negotiation. And Ralph Angel, he's kind of giving his expertise about farming, and Landry doesn't really care. He's like, you're either going to take the $850 or, or leave it. He's not negotiating with them. Next, we're going to talk about Micah, and when the camera pans in on him, he's on the phone with his girlfriend, and her name is Stella. And I thought it was interesting that Stella kind of resembles the woman that was in the video that Davis and his teammates are accused of gang raping. So I guess like father, like son, but she wasn't a black girl. I couldn't tell if she was Hispanic or white, but she had dark hair. And Charlie comes to the door to talk to him, and he's kind of dismissive and disrespectful of her. And so when she closes the door, he goes back to the phone. And Stella is like making fun of, she's like, who is that? Who was that at the door? And when he says his mom, and then she starts saying, oh, well, I thought it was one of your relatives. And she starts, making light of the fact that they all have unusual names. And, that was like, Micah, you don't want to be with a woman who's, making fun of your family and who can't respect your family. And you can tell, he kind of laughed about it, but you can tell that he sort of didn't appreciate it either. So, let's keep an eye on Miss Stella and see what she's all about. And so he asks Stella if she's been by his house, and she lets him know that it's like a circus and there's so much media parked on the street that you can't even go down the road. And the conversation ends, and then later we see Violet on the porch, and she's watering her plants when Davis arrives looking for his family. And, Violet is that relative that if you are mad at your husband or your boyfriend, she's mad at your husband or your boyfriend. And she gets smart with Davis, and she goes towards the house, and Davis comes up on the porch, and he goes to follow her in the house, and she lets the door fall in his face. And so then he goes in the house, and Hollywood and Ralph Angel are sitting at the table. And so they're trying to be nice to Davis, and they offer him some coffee, and Violet said, we don't have any coffee. And then Hollywood gets up and says, oh, well, I'll get him some iced tea. And then Violet was like, we ain't got no iced tea either. And so it was real funny because that scene is just so real. And what's so crazy about it is she's hating Davis now because Charlie's mad at Davis. But if Charlie gets back with Davis tomorrow, then she'll be all in love with Charlie again, because that's how the black code works. I also think it's funny how the men in real life, they don't want to get caught up in the drama that's going on. And so the guys on the show were kind of looking at each other, making eyes, like going from Violet to Davis, because they like to remain neutral and don't want to get into family business, because they know that, once the man and the woman work it out, things are going to be back to normal. So why even go through the trouble of being mad at the guy? And plus, they probably think at this point Davis needs all the friends that he can get. So Michael comes in, and he sees his dad, and it's a tense moment because it's like he doesn't know whether to be happy to see his dad or to be angry that his dad is there. He doesn't really know how to react. And then Charlie enters from a bedroom, and you can tell that she's still angry, and she asks Davis, why is he there? And Davis says that he needs to speak to her in private. And then Violet throws shade, and she's like, well, your business is already in the streets, what you need privacy for now. So Davis is like, well, what the hell? So in front of everybody, he tells Charlie that the Houston police want to question him. So then Charlie is like, let's go outside. So the two of them go outside, and he tells Charlie that he and 2 other players have been suspended from the team. And then he goes on to confess to her that he hired the prostitute and that he did have sex with her that night, but it was consensual. It wasn't a rape as the woman is claiming. And then he apologizes to Charlie, but Charlie doesn't accept the apology because she's telling him that the only reason he's apologizing is because he got caught. And, if he hadn't gotten caught, she'd never know about it. And then he tells her, I really need you right now. And she says, you don't need me, you need a lawyer. And so Micah comes out, and upon learning that they won't be going to Houston with his dad as planned, he lashes out at Charlie, for not supporting Davis. And then Charlie accuses Davis of coming between her and her son when Micah says he'll go to Houston with Davis without her because his dad needs somebody there by his side to support him. And so when Davis agrees, and it's like, yeah, that would be a great idea. Charlie says that that's not happening, and then Michael runs off, and the scene between the three of them is so complex, and it shows how women can't separate their anger for the men from their children. And so Charlie's sort of pulling Micah into the feud and kind of using him as a pawn in the game, and this is how kids become collateral damage when adults don't deal with their issues the correct way. And so later in the episode, Micah is out on the porch, and Charlie approaches him and lets him know that they'll be staying in St. Josephine a little longer. And he is upset and asks if she cares about Davis at all. And you can tell that he's really confused that his dad has to deal with the scandal by himself. Charlie lets him know things are going to come out, but they will eventually go back home. And Micah tells her that he's leaving in the morning, and there's really nothing she can do about it. I guess he's mapped it out, and Davis is going to meet him at the airport. And so it was kind of feel for Micah, because this has to be like a really confusing time, and you figure he's like 14 or 15 years old, and one day he's this happy kid, son of a star basketball player, successful mom, and then the next day, his father's involved in a scandal, his grandfather passes away, and their lives are just torn apart. So this is all confusing and new to him. So next we're going to talk about Nova, and Nova is heading to visit a young man named Too Sweet, who's been arrested for drug possession. And I think he said he was skipping school when the police picked him up, and he claims to be innocent and that he wants to fight the charges. And I think he's been in prison a really long time, or locked up longer than he has to be, because the court system is so overwhelmed that they don't have a public defender available to represent him. And I want to stick a pin in this because Ava DuVernay came out, she has a special called 13th, where she's talking about the 13th Amendment and how, all these black boys and men are incarcerated, and it's airing on Netflix, and I've been hearing nothing but wonderful things about it, so you may want to check it out. So back to the recap, Nova is explaining to Too Sweet how the system is designed to get black people locked up, and prison is a big business. And so what they do is they make them sit there in jail without representation in hopes that they'll cop to a lesser plea. But what that does is give them a record that stays with them and complicates their life along the way. But if he's really innocent and he wants to fight, for his innocence, then she's willing to stand by him and support him and do whatever needs to be done. So we see Nova and Charlie, and they're at the diner that Violet works at. And Charlie lets Nova know that Davis is being questioned by the police. And when Nova asks, did he do what they're saying he did, Charlie lets her know that the woman was a prostitute and they had hired her, and that, Davis didn't rape the woman. And then Nova shows us why, married women shouldn't take advice from single women, especially single women that are sleeping with married men, because Nova is like, forget about Davis, let him handle his own problems, and you need to work on you and getting yourself together and take time out for yourself. So she really doesn't understand that, the whole marriage concept of for better or for worse, and that, Davis is her husband, and regardless of what he did, they've got to work through this together, that Charlie can't just up and leave and, leave him out there hanging. And so, Violet joins them at the table, and then Nova jokes that, you know, it was nice of her to invite them to lunch. Too bad she forgot she had to work that day. And then Violet, you know, reprimands them about the way that they treat Ralph Angel and asks them to be nicer to him and listen, you know, to what he has to say, and, you know, make him feel like he has a voice in the decisions that were being made. And then she goes, well, that's all I had to say. And she gets up and she goes back to work. As Violet walks away, the camera scans over to, it's like a, you know, it's in a diner, and then you have people that eat at the counter. And we see Remy walk in, and, you know, Charlie face lights up, you know, she's happy to see him. And she goes over and asks, can she talk to him for a minute? So they end up going outside, and he tells her that he has the, whatever the part was for the tractor that Ernest had ordered from him. And so they walk around to the back to his truck, and he gets the auto part out. And then Charlie says, you know, she wants to talk about Sam Landry, and says how they went and met with him, and he gave them a low figure for the land. And then Remy tells her that Landry is notorious for targeting black farmers who are in financial distress, and then buys their land for little or nothing. And he then invites her to a potluck dinner that a group of farmers are having, you know, where they sit around and they talk about what's going on in the business. And he thinks it'll be a good opportunity for her to meet some of the guys and get to know a little bit about the farming business. And she tells him that, you know, she doesn't think she's going to come, but he gives her the address just in case she changes her mind. So next the scene goes to Violet, and it's she's going ready to go on lunch, and Hollywood is out in the parking lot waiting on her. And there's a girl named Roberta who's at the truck, and she's like leaning in on the truck, and she has her uniform is unbuttoned, and you can see all of her boobs all pushed up in Hollywood's face, and she's reaching in, playing with the necklace that he has on. And Violet comes out, and she like sachets over and hops in the truck like she's unbothered. And she tells Roberta, oh, I think your lunch is over with and mine is just starting. And then she goes, bye, Roberta. And then Roberta like rolls her eyes and walks off. So we see Hollywood and Violet, they've driven out to a field, and they're parked under a tree. And Hollywood has let the tailgate down on his truck, and they're sitting on the back of the truck eating whatever he had brought for her for lunch. And he's joking with her about having her shirt buttoned all the way up to the neck. And he tells her, you know, if she lets some of the buttons open, that she get as many tips as Roberta does. And Violet, you know, she laughs about it, but then she starts talking about, you know, her insecurities and how she's worried about Hollywood leaving her for someone else. And he lets her know that, you know, she has nothing to worry about, and that she's all that he needs. And, you know, so that kind of comforts her. But the whole while they're talking, she's taking off her shoes and she's rubbing her feet. And it was just really weird that, you know, she goes from rubbing her feet, and then they start feeding each other the food. And I was just like, okay, y'all are keeping it just a little bit too real on this show. But the two of them, you can tell they really love each other, and they have something good going on. So next we go to Ralph Angel. He's meeting with his parole officer at the house, and we learned that he actually had a job interview around the time between the father passing and the funeral. He was supposed to apply for a job, and he didn't show up for the interview and didn't contact his parole officer to let him know what was going on. But he's excited about, you know, telling the parole officer about the land and how, you know, he'll be able to build a future for him and Blue by farming the land. And the parole officer, you can tell he wants to care and, you know, give him a chance, but he has to let Ralph Angel know that the terms of his parole is that he has a 40-hour a week job, and he needs a paycheck to prove that he's working the 40 hours. And so he gives him the lead on another job and tells him to make sure that he goes and apply for the job, and that this person is really good about hiring ex-convicts and knows the whole process about him being on parole and everything. And so, you know, as he's leaving, he wishes Ralph Angel luck. And so when the parole officer leaves, Ralph Angel calls Blue into the room, and Blue runs up to him, and, you know, they're embracing, you know, he's holding Blue, and you can tell that he really loves Blue and he wants to do the right thing. But like most, you know, people, you know, when they get out of jail, they're dreaming about all the things that they can do instead of doing the things that they should do, which usually lands them back in prison. And Ralph Angel is definitely a dreamer, and he just has high hopes for this land that they've inherited from the dad, and he thinks it's going to change his whole life and make things better. So Ralph Angel, he does go and apply for the job, and the guy does agree to hire him. So next, when we see Ralph Angel, he's goes to his father's house, and he walks in on Charlie and Nova, and they're packing up all of his dad's belongings, and this, really upsets him. And he tells them, that he wanted to go through those things, and he can't understand why they're in such a hurry to pack everything up, and and just like they're trying to move on faster than he thinks that they should. And so they start arguing, and then he tells Charlie, well, you didn't even live here, you only came for the summers. And then when Nova jumps in, he tells her that she really has no say so either, because when she turned 18, she couldn't wait to move away, to get out of the house and move away, and that he's the one that's been there for their dad and supporting their dad. So he thinks that he's the one that should have a say so about what happens with everything. So as they're arguing, you can hear like the beeping sound of a truck biking up, and so they all run outside, and it's a tow truck, and the guy is there to repossess the father's tractor. He says that a payment hasn't been made in, I think he said 90 days. And so Charlie, she says, well, our father just died recently, and I can pay whatever the past due amount is, but please don't take the tractor. And the guy, he tells her that's not how it works, that he's there to take the tractor, and she'll have to work everything else out with the people who hired him. And so Ralph Angel runs into the house, and he gets a gun, and he comes back and he points the gun at the tow truck driver, and then there's another guy who was like behind him doing something in the back of the truck, in the cab of the truck, and he pulls out a shotgun, and he comes up and he points the shotgun at Ralph Angel. And so Ralph Angel doesn't back down. He's like, I hope you can use that, because I know how to use mine. And, the only thing that's going to happen here is you're going to, let us keep this tractor. And so Charlie and Nova, they're begging for him to stop. And then the first tow truck driver, he's like, don't do something that you're going to regret. And then Blue runs out of the house, and, he's calling for his dad. And then that kind of snaps Ralph Angel back into reality. But he's telling Blue to go back in the house. But Blue's like, no, Daddy, you come inside. And so he runs down off the steps and comes to his dad, and begging his dad to stop and come back in the house. And so Charlie, I think it was Charlie, got Blue, and it's like pulling him back in the house, and Ralph Angel came to his senses and gave Nova the gun. And so the guys do end up taking the tractor, but when they get back in the house, Nova lays the gun on the piano as she walks in the house. And I'm just sitting there praying, like, oh my God, I hope they don't forget about that gun. And Blue comes along, and, something even worse happens. But that's just me, thinking ahead. And so Ralph Angel, he's really sad, and he's crying, and he apologizes to his sisters. And I just hate to see men crying. And I just feel so sorry for him, because he, if you just know guys who've been in the system and they just want to do good, but the harder they want, the harder they try, and the more they want to do good, the more bad things that happen. So this show is just, the acting is phenomenal, and these scenes are just so realistic. And so I was also thinking, like, this is the second time, we're only on episode 3, and this is the second time Ralph Angel has committed a felony. Remember, he robbed the convenience store in the first episode, and police never came, for that. And then we never see the police come, to investigate about him pulling the gun on the tow truck driver. So I don't know if they're used to this kind of stuff happening and realized he was emotional, took pity on him, or, if this is going to come back, later on in the season. And so later that night, Ralph Angel goes over to the baby mama's house. And I really hate using the term baby mama, but I don't recall them ever saying the girl's name, but I'm going to research and try and figure out what her name is. But he goes to her house, and she lives in a trailer park. and she comes to the door, and I don't think they ever said anything to each other, but it's like this unspoken language, and she reaches down and tries to kiss him, and he pulls away, and so then she like reaches for his belt buckle, and I'm thinking, okay, so y'all just gonna have sex out here, on the step in front of everybody? But then he ends up picking her up and carrying her back into the trailer, and so we know what happens next. And all I'm thinking is, okay, she's either gonna give you an STD or she's gonna give you another baby, and you just the mistakes that guys make, or people in general make, when they're lonely and they're just feeling hopeless. And so anyway, I wanted to see Ralph Angel get with the teacher, but look like he's about to mess that up. So next we're going to talk about Charlie. Charlie does go ahead and attend the meeting, the potluck meeting that the farmers are having, and she walks in towards the end of the meeting, and there's a guy who I think we saw in the first episode who's another farmer, and he was friends with her dad. And so he's basically talking about how, the black farmers are losing their land to people like Sam Landry. And then after the dinner is over with, Charlie's cleaning up, and Remy comes in, and tell her she doesn't have to do that. And you can just tell that the chemistry between the two of them is really, really strong. And so I'm trying to figure out, do we get rid of Davis and keep Remy, and Charlie ends up moving to St. Josephine, and so something kindles between the two of them? But of course we have to wait and see. And so Remy is telling Charlie that it was actually her dad who started the potluck dinners for the farmers to come together. And he's talking about how committed her dad was to keeping his land. He tells her that a lot of the black farmers, in order to stay afloat and keep their property, they end up leasing their land out to other people. And that the good thing about Ernest is that they have many choices about what they could do with the land. And for the first time, we can tell that Charlie is thinking about maybe staying around and helping Ralph Angel farm the land. And so later we see Charlie and Nova, and they decide to support Ralph Angel and keep the farm for at least a year. And they're laying out to Ralph Angel how they want him and Blue to move into the father's house, and how they're going to get this money, and they're going to buy whatever they need, the seeds or whatever, the stalks, to plant the crop. And then after 1 year, they'll see how they do financially, and then maybe they can sell the land after that. But they're still thinking selling the land, but they're putting it off for a year. But Ralph Angel, even though he's happy that they are going to do it for a year, he really wants to keep the land forever. So of course he's hoping that everything works out and he can convince them to keep the land. And so the show ends with Charlie calling Sam Landry to tell him that they're not going to accept his offer. And he sort of gives her a threat. He tells her to be careful because they do things differently in Louisiana. And then she lets him know, she's smart. She knows what's going on, and she knows a little something about, farming and taking care of business. And so that's how the show ended. Another good episode. Looking forward to episode 4. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and rate the video, and share with your friends. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.